You've arrived at Adventures in Dreamland. Soft, surreal, and slightly cheeky sleep stories with awe and wonder. I'm Serene, your guide tonight. Whether you're here for sleepy science, surreal dreamscapes, or stories that shape who you're becoming, I'm grateful you're here. I write these stories to help you drift and grow. Each night, you're welcomed into a dreamy space from across the world. I'd love to know where you are and what makes your space extra cozy. Running a story cabin in the clouds isn't free. The greatest gift you can give to support my work is sharing our adventures with a friend. Now, we return to what we are. Every living organism on this planet, no matter how small or complex, wants the same thing. Every action we take is for this one thing: to avoid pain and obtain bliss. Bliss is a state of endless joy, mixed with peace beyond our knowing. Whether you call it the soul, awareness, or your highest self, that part of you, during deep sleep, temporarily withdraws from the body and the conscious mind and returns to the freedom and unity with the divine. Bliss without awareness. This restores not just the body and mind, but our spirits too, offering a sense of inner peace and clarity. So yes, sleep is sacred. You are returning back to your natural state. Freedom. Your story begins. The Deadly Dancing Plague of 1518 is episode 53 and part of our Dream Wonders playlist, where we appreciate fascinating facts in our world of wonder. The cobblestones are warm beneath your feet. You find yourself standing in a narrow street as the last light of a summer evening turns the half-timbered houses golden. The air smells of bread smoke and river water, and somewhere nearby, a cathedral bell rings low and slow, the kind of sound that seems to come from inside your own chest. Strasbourg, July 1518. Today, this is modern-day France, near the German border. You blink, taking it in. Okay, either I've wandered into the world's most historically accurate Renaissance fair, or I've time-traveled without filling out the proper paperwork. A woman sits alone by a stone fountain at the end of the lane. She's older, maybe 50, with tired hands folded in her lap and eyes that have seen something most people wouldn't believe. When she notices you, she doesn't startle. She just nods, like she's been waiting. You're here about the dancing, she says. Not a question. You open your mouth to answer, but she's already gesturing for you to sit beside her. My name is Frau Troffea, and yes, I'm the one who started it all. Though, started isn't quite right. My feet started it. I just couldn't make them stop. She looks down at those feet now, tucked beneath her skirt, still and quiet. I danced for 6 days, No music, no joy, just movement that wouldn't end. They carried me up a mountain in the end, prayed over me at the shrine of St. Vitus, and somehow I stopped. She meets your eyes. I survived. But what came after me, what spread through these streets like fire through dry wheat, that's what you're here to understand. She stands slowly, brushing dust from her apron. Come, walk with me. I'll show you what happened here. And maybe by the end, you'll understand something the physicians and priests never could. The city breathes around you as you follow her into the twilight. 2. Not the only one. Frau Troffea walks slowly, her voice settling into a rhythm as familiar as the cobblestones beneath your feet. You think this was madness, she says. A single strange summer, one unlucky city. She shakes her head. It wasn't. What happened here in Strasbourg, it had happened before, many times, in many places, for centuries. She pauses at a corner where a lantern flickers in a window. In 1021, a group of villagers in a town called Kilbeck began dancing in a churchyard. They danced through an entire Christmas Mass. The priest cursed them to dance for a full year, and they did. Some say their feet wore grooves into the earth itself. You feel a chill despite the warm air. In 1237, 100 children in Erfurt danced along a road for miles until they collapsed. Some never woke. In 1278, 200 people danced on a bridge over the river Meuse until it collapsed beneath them. Dozens drowned, still moving, still twitching, even as the water swallowed them. She turns to look at you. And in 1374, the Great Plague of dancing, it swept through towns along the Rhine. Thousands were afflicted, thousands, across villages, across borders, across months. They danced in churches, in streets, in fields. Some stripped off their clothes. Some screamed about demons. Some laughed until they wept and wept until they laughed. The street ahead seems darker now, though the sky hasn't changed. So, when my feet began to move that July morning, I was not the first. I was simply the next, the newest thread in a tapestry of madness that had been weaving itself across Europe for 500 years. She gestures ahead, where the cathedral spire cuts into the pale sky. Physicians have tried to explain it. Priests have tried to pray it away, but no one truly knows why the dancing comes, or when, or who it will choose. Her voice softens. All we know is that it does, again and again. And in the summer of 1518, it chose Strasbourg. She begins walking again. Now let me tell you what kind of world we were living in when the music that no one could hear began to play. 3. A world already breaking. The street opens into a small square, and Frau Troffea stops beside a dry well. "You want to know why we danced?" she asks. "Look around, not at what you see now, but at what was here before, what we had already survived, or hadn't." She rests a hand on the stone rim of the well. The winters before that summer, brutal. Cold that cracked the bones of houses. Snow that buried entire villages. And when the snow finally melted, what came? Floods. The Rhine swelled and swallowed farms whole. Crops rotted before they could be harvested. She looks at you, her eyes steady. Then came the hunger, real hunger, the kind that makes mothers boil bark into soup. The kind that makes children chew leather just to feel something in their stomachs. I watched my neighbor's son die with a bloated belly and hollow eyes. He was 4. The square feels heavier now. And the sickness, oh, the sickness. Smallpox had torn through the city just 2 years before, left pockmarks on the living in silence where the dead used to breathe. And syphilis, that new plague from across the sea, it was everywhere by then. No cure, no mercy, just slow rotting from the inside out. She begins walking again, her voice low but clear. The church told us we were being punished, that God was angry, that the saints had turned their backs on us because of our sin, and we believed them. What else could we believe? When your child dies in your arms, and the priest says it's because you weren't pious enough, you believe him. You have to. Otherwise, the world is just chaos. She stops at the edge of the square, looking down a long, narrow lane. So, when I stepped into the street that July morning and my feet began to move, my body was already broken. My spirit was already thin. The city was already a wound waiting to bleed. A pause. The dancing didn't come from nowhere. It came from everything. From all of it. From years of holding on with nothing left to hold. She looks at you, and I was simply the first to let go. 4. The first step. Frau Troffea leads you down the narrow lane, stopping in front of a modest house with a crooked door. "This was my home," she says quietly. "That morning, July 14th, I woke before dawn. My husband was still asleep. I remember the light coming through the shutters, gray, thin, the kind of light that doesn't promise anything." She steps closer to the door, but doesn't touch it. I don't remember deciding to go outside. I don't remember putting on my shoes. I just found myself in the street, and then my foot moved. Just one small step, then another, then a turn, then a rhythm I couldn't name. Her hands fold together. There was no music, not a single note, just silence and my own breathing and the slap of my feet against the stones. I thought, I'll stop in a moment. I'll catch my breath and go back inside and start the fire for breakfast. She shakes her head slowly, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. My legs kept moving. My arms began to swing. My hips twisted in ways I had never moved before, not even as a young woman. not even when there was music and wine and reason to dance. You watch her face as she speaks. There's no fear there now, just memory, heavy and still. People came out to watch. First my neighbors, then strangers. They called my name. They shouted at me to stop. My husband grabbed my arm, and I spun out of his grip without meaning to. My body wasn't mine anymore. She walks a few steps forward, standing now in the middle of the lane. By noon, I was drenched in sweat. By evening, my feet were bleeding. By the second day, I couldn't feel them at all. I danced through meals I never ate, through sleep I never had, through prayers I could hear but not speak. A long breath. 6 days. I danced for 6 days in this street, in the square, in front of the cathedral. They tried to hold me down. They tried to tie my legs. Nothing worked. My body had made a decision. My mind was not invited to. She turns to you. And here's the part that still haunts me, even now, even years later. Somewhere inside those 6 days, I stopped being afraid. I stopped wanting it to end. I became the movement, nothing more, nothing less. Her voice drops to almost a whisper, and that's when others began to join me. 5. The spread. Frau Troffea walks you toward the main square, where the cathedral's shadow stretches long across the stones. It started with a woman named Agnes, she says, a baker's wife. I remember seeing her standing at the edge of the crowd on my second day. Her face was pale. Her lips were moving like she was praying or arguing with herself. She stops walking, and then she stepped forward. 1 step, 2. Her arms rose without permission, and she was dancing beside me. The square opens before you now, wide and quiet in the evening light. By the end of that first week, there were 34 of us, 34 bodies moving in patterns no one had taught us. Strangers dancing together like we had rehearsed it our whole lives. Old women, young men, children. She gestures across the square. They came from everywhere. A blacksmith left his forge mid-swing, hammer still in hand. A mother set down her nursing baby and walked straight into the crowd. A priest tore off his vestments and joined us right there in front of the cathedral steps. Her voice tightens. By the end of the month, there were 400 people dancing in the streets of Strasbourg. The city didn't know what to do. The physicians were useless. The church was terrified. She looks at you. Some of us danced in clusters, spinning in circles like children's games gone wrong. Some danced alone, eyes closed, mouths open, speaking to things no one else could see. Some wept the entire time. Some laughed. Horrible laughter, the kind that doesn't come from joy. A pause. And the ones who fell, They didn't always get back up. Hearts gave out. Legs snapped. I saw a man collapse, and his body kept twitching for an hour after his eyes went still. She sits on the edge of a stone bench, suddenly tired. We weren't a celebration. We weren't a festival. We were a plague made of movement instead of fever. And no one, not the doctors, not the priests, not the city council with all their wisdom, no one knew how to make it stop. She looks up at the cathedral spire, now black against the darkening sky. So they tried the only things they could think of, and every single one made it worse. 6. The failed cures. Frau Troffea stands and walks toward the cathedral steps. The city council met in emergency session, she says. Physicians, priests, merchants, all of them staring at each other across a long wooden table, asking the same question. What do we do? She climbs the first few steps and turns to face you. The physicians spoke first. They believed it was hot blood, an overheating of the body that caused uncontrollable movement. Their prescription, more dancing. Let the afflicted dance it out of their systems. Sweat out the fever. Exhaust the madness. She laughs, a short, hollow sound. So the city built us a stage, a wooden platform right here in the square. They hired musicians, drummers, fifers, even a band of professional dancers to guide our movements. They thought if they gave us music, we would find rhythm. If we found rhythm, we would find control. If we found control, we would stop. She shakes her head slowly. It didn't work. The music didn't calm us. It fed us. The drums matched our heartbeats, and our heartbeats matched the drums. And we danced faster, harder, longer. More people joined. The crowd of watchers shrank as the crowd of dancers grew. The very cure they invented became the disease's greatest fuel. She descends the steps again. When the music failed, the priests stepped forward. They declared it possession, demonic influence. They brought holy water and crucifixes. They held exorcisms in the streets, screaming Latin prayers over women who couldn't stop spinning, over men whose legs buckled and straightened and buckled again. A pause. The exorcisms did nothing, or maybe they did something worse. They made people more afraid. And fear, it turned out, was part of what kept the dancing alive. She begins walking again, leading you down a side street. Finally, someone remembered Saint Vitus, the same saint who was said to curse people with dancing plagues. The logic was simple. If he cursed us, perhaps he could uncurse us. So they loaded the worst of us onto carts and carried us up the mountain to his shrine. She stops. That's where they took me. That's where I finally stopped. Whether it was the prayers, or the exhaustion, or simply that my body had nothing left to give, I don't know. I only know that I woke up still, completely, terribly, beautifully still. Her voice softens. But by then, Hundreds were still dancing in the streets below. 7. What it did to the body. Frau Troffea leads you to a quieter lane where the lamplight barely reaches. You want to know what it felt like, she says. Inside the body, inside the flesh that wouldn't obey. She walks slowly now, her words measured. We didn't eat for days, some of us for weeks. Nothing passed our lips but the occasional sip of water forced between our teeth by desperate family members. Our stomachs shrank. Our ribs began to show. I lost more weight in 6 days than I had in 6 years of ordinary life. She touches her own arm absently. We didn't sleep, not real sleep. Sometimes the body would collapse and we would lie on the ground still twitching, legs jerking, feet flexing. But the mind never rested. The dreams, if you could call them dreams, were just more dancing. Endless corridors of movement with no exit. A cat crosses the lane ahead of you, silent and quick. The feet suffered most. Blisters formed and burst and formed again. The skin wore away until we were dancing on raw flesh. I saw people leave bloody footprints across the cobblestones. I saw toenails come loose and fall away like leaves. I saw bones break, ankles snapping sideways, and still the dancing continued. The body didn't care that it was destroying itself. She pauses by a doorway. Hearts gave out. I watched a man named Berthold, a tanner, strong as an ox, dance for 11 days straight. On the 12th morning he clutched his chest, gasped once, and fell. His heart had simply stopped, worn out like an old shoe. Her voice lowers. Strokes took others. Their faces would twist suddenly, one side drooping, and they would crumple mid-spin. Some never woke. Some woke, but couldn't speak, couldn't walk. The dancing had stolen something from their brains that would never return. She looks at you directly. The physicians counted the dead. At least 15, they said. Maybe more. But I think the real number was higher. Some bodies were carried away quietly by ashamed families. Some dancers wandered off and were found days later in fields or forests, still and cold. A long breath. The body is not meant to move without rest. It is not designed to burn without fuel. What happened here was not just madness. It was a kind of slow murder, the body killing itself one step at a time. 8. What it did to the mind. The lane opens into a small courtyard where a well sits dry and forgotten. The body breaks, Frau Troffea says, sitting on the edge of the well. But the mind does something stranger. It escapes. She looks up at the stars beginning to appear overhead. Some of us went silent, completely silent, eyes open but empty, moving like puppets with no one holding the strings. I would look into their faces and see nothing No fear, no pain, no recognition, just absence, as if the person had left and only the dancing remained. She folds her hands in her lap. Others screamed, not words, just sounds, animal sounds. They screamed about things they were seeing that we couldn't see. Demons climbing out of the cobblestones, rivers of blood pouring from the cathedral doors, dead relatives standing at the edge of the crowd, beckoning, a pause. One woman, I never learned her name, danced for 9 days while shouting prophecies. She said the world would end in fire. She said the saints had abandoned Strasbourg. She said she could see angels weeping in the clouds. On the 10th day, she stopped shouting. On the 11th, she stopped dancing. On the 12th, she stopped breathing. Frau Troffea's voice is steady but soft. And the strangest part, when it finally ended, when the dancing stopped and we could speak again, most of us remembered nothing. Days of our lives simply gone. I have fragments, flashes, the feeling of heat, the sound of my own breathing, but the details are smoke. She stands slowly. Some remembered everything. Those were the unlucky ones. They remembered every moment of being trapped inside a body they couldn't control, every hour of wanting to stop and being unable to stop, every prayer that went unanswered. She meets your eyes. Which is worse, to forget your own suffering or to carry it forever? I still don't know the answer. She begins walking again toward a distant glow. But I know this, whatever happened to our minds during those weeks, it was not simply madness. It was something deeper, something the physicians couldn't name and the priests couldn't pray away, something that still has no word in any language I know. 9. The theories. Frau Troffea stops beneath an archway where the stone is cool and the street noise fades. You want to know why, she says. Everyone wants to know why. The physicians, the priests, the historians who will write about us someday. They all need a reason, a cause, something to point at and say, there, that's what did it. She leans against the wall. Some say it was the bread, ergot, a fungus that grows on rye when the conditions are wrong. It gets into the grain, into the flour, into the loaves we eat every day. And ergot does something to the mind. It causes convulsions, hallucinations, a burning sensation in the limbs that peasants called St. Anthony's fire. She tilts her head. Funny thing about ergot, centuries from now, a chemist will extract something from it, a compound called LSD, and people will take it deliberately, seeking visions, seeking escape, seeking something the ordinary mind cannot reach. A small smile crosses her face. Maybe we were all just tripping on bad bread. Maybe the dancing plague was history's first accidental acid trip. The physicians would hate that explanation. Too simple, too chemical, not enough demons. She pushes off from the wall and walks slowly. Others say it was mass hysteria, the mind breaking under pressure and finding company in its breaking. One person cracks, and the crack spreads like a fracture through ice. We were starving, diseased, terrified, and we had been told our whole lives that St. Vitus could curse us with dancing if we displeased him. So when one woman began to dance, some part of our minds whispered, "It's happening. The curse is here," and belief became reality. She stops in a pool of moonlight. The modern word is psychogenic, illness born from the mind, not the body. But that word didn't exist in 1518. We only knew that fear was contagious, and once enough people believed the dancing was a curse, the curse became real. A pause. And maybe it was both. Bad bread and broken minds, poison and belief, the body weakened by ergot, the spirit weakened by years of suffering, and the two combining into something neither could create alone. She looks at you. I don't know which theory is true. I only know what I felt, that my body was no longer mine, that something else was moving me. Whether that something was a fungus, or a fear, or a saint's cold anger, I cannot say. She turns toward the edge of the city. What I can say is this: it ended. Slowly, painfully, it ended. And maybe that's the only theory that matters. 10. How it ended. The streets grow quieter as Frau Troffea leads you toward the edge of Strasbourg, where the buildings thin and the fields begin. It didn't end all at once, she says. There was no moment when the music stopped and everyone stood still. It faded, like a fever breaking, like a storm moving on to trouble some other city. She walks beside a low stone wall, trailing her fingers along its surface. The city council finally banned the musicians. They realized, too late, that the music was making it worse. The stages came down, the drums went silent, and without that fuel, some of the dancers began to slow. A pause. They kept carrying people to the shrine of St. Vitus on the mountain. Day after day, cart after cart. The priests prayed over us. They placed blessed crosses in our hands. They made us wear red shoes. Don't ask me why. Something about the color driving out evil. Whether it worked, or whether we were simply exhausted beyond movement, the dancing stopped for more and more of us. She stops walking and looks back toward the city. By early September, it was over. The last dancers had either recovered, collapsed, or died. The streets were quiet again. The cobblestones were just cobblestones. The cathedral bell rang for ordinary prayers, not emergency exorcisms. Her voice softens. But the city never forgot. How could we? We had watched our neighbors dance themselves to death. We had seen things that made no sense and still make no sense. We had learned that the human body could betray the human mind in ways we never imagined. She sits on the low wall, suddenly tired. The physicians wrote their reports. The priests gave their sermons. The city council passed new laws about public gatherings, as if laws could prevent whatever had happened from happening again. A long silence. And those of us who survived, we went back to our lives. We baked bread. We mended clothes. We raised children and buried parents and tried to pretend that summer was just a strange dream. She looks at you. But sometimes, late at night, I feel my foot tap against the floor. Just once. Just a small movement. And I hold my breath and wait to see if it will happen again. She stands slowly. It never does. But I always wait. I think I'll wait for the rest of my life. 11. Safe and still. Frau Troffea walks you back toward the fountain where you first met her. The city is quiet now, wrapped in the soft blue of late evening. The cathedral spire is a dark shape against the stars. You came here to understand, she says, and maybe you do now. Or maybe you understand that some things resist understanding. She sits by the fountain, the same spot where this journey began. What I know is this: we were not evil. We were not cursed. We were not punished for sins we couldn't name. We were people, frightened, hungry, sick, exhausted people, and something in us broke. Something that needed to move when everything else had to stay still. The water in the fountain is motionless, a mirror of the sky. And you, she says, looking at you with warmth, you've walked these streets with me. You've seen what I saw. You've heard what I couldn't tell anyone for years. She reaches out and touches your hand. Her fingers are cool and gentle. But you're not here to dance. You're here to rest. And rest is what I want for you now. The city around you begins to soften. The edges of the buildings blur. The cobblestones beneath your feet feel less like stone and more like something gentler, something familiar. You're safe, Frau Troffea says. Your feet are still. Your body is yours. Whatever storms are raging in your world, tonight they cannot reach you. The fountain's reflection ripples, though there is no wind. Let the stillness hold you. Let the quiet wrap around you like a blanket. You've traveled far tonight, through centuries, through suffering, through stories that most people will never know. Her voice is fading now, blending with the soft hum of night. And now you can let go, not into movement, into rest, into the deep, sweet stillness that the dancers never found, but you have waiting for you right now. The stars above Strasbourg begin to look like the stars outside your window. The fountain sounds like the quiet of your own room. Frau Troffea's voice is barely a whisper. You are safe. You are still. You are home. A breath. Sweet dreams.